The right seed, nurtured well, can one day become a mighty tree. And that is exactly the story of CIPM, the personnel officers of 1940s Ceylon, who had navigated choppy seas for years, had become personnel managers in the 1950s. A new phenomenon, to say the least. It was among from this number, under the aegis of the ILO and the Department of Labor, that the Institute of Personnel Management was born on the 22nd of April, 1960. The architects of this national endeavor comprised of Senator, the Honorable Sir Cyril de Souza as founder president, and several industry leaders as office bearers, including Mr. K. Somasundaram, Mr. S.B. Kumarasinghe, Mr. W.H. Savarimuthu, Mr. S.C.G. Pereira, Mr. R. Yogaraja, Mr. S.W. Nelson, Mr. M. Kantiratnam, Mr. D.S. Bandarage, Mr. M.E. Senaviratna, Mr. R.I.P. Veerakon, Mr. K.M.U. Jayaneddi, Mr. D.E. Vanaguru, and Mr. M.E. Fonseca. Thus, IPM was geared to elevate the field of personnel management to fulfill a national need. Along this journey, there were moments that have become significant national milestones, which includes the Handbook of Personnel Management, compiled by Dr. D.S. Bandarage in 1962, considered the premier guide to personnel management in Sri Lanka for decades. Early professional studies in HR were driven by Mr. S. Egalaheva, former Vice President and the then Director of Studies and Senior Lecturer. He helped the IPM in numerous ways, providing voluntary advisory services. Mr. M.C. Mathupala, who hails from the early days of IPM, was an active council member, advisor and guru for many decades, adding great value. Past presidents who provided yeoman service and leadership were Mr. Nihal Kanakaratna, Mr. S.B.M. Ranatunga, Dr. D.S. Bandarage, Mr. Claude Mendes, Mr. C.T. Caldera, Mr. N.L. Jans, Mr. Joe Madavela, Mr. M.P. Galapatti, Mr. N.R.B. Ranasurya, Dr. Ranjit Cabral, Mr. Gamini De Silva, Mr. Bandula Ratnayaka, and Mrs. Sumitra Fernando. CIPM has fond memories of late Mr. L.S. Pires, Mr. N.E.D. Vijayagunawardana, Mr. A. Joseph, Mr. Y.S. David, late Professor Sudatta Ranasinghe, Mr. Rienzi Pereira, and Mr. Joe Madavala, who were strong pillars of strength. IPM was incorporated as a professional body in the discipline of Human Resource Management by Parliamentary Act No. 24 of 1976. The Parliamentary Act empowered IPM to promote and develop the principles, techniques, and practice of personnel management in the interest of the industrial and economic development of Sri Lanka. In 1985, the first ever National HR Congress was organized by IPM. Links with CIPD UK were established in the year 2000 with Mr. Jeff Armstrong, its Director General, gracing the IPM conference as chief guest. Past President Mr. Krisantha Obesekara was instrumental in establishing this long-standing link with CIPD. After over 40 years of IPM being located in small locations, lacking adequate facilities, the year 1998 saw President Mr. Krisantha Obesekara investing in land to construct the institution's first ever building. The HR House was officially declared open on the 31st of July 2001 by Mr. Krisantha Obesekara. At this site, after the completion of a multi-storied building, the opening ceremony was followed by other memorable milestones, such as unveiling of all past presidents' photographs, hosting of the AGM, the launching of the first IPM website, and the opening of the boardroom and the mini library. Mrs. Sumitra Fernando, past president, assisted in introducing the owner of the land, negotiating and writing of deeds on a voluntary basis. In the year 2000, the government, by an act of parliament, exempted IPM from income tax as a result of a strong case developed by Mr. Jayantha Jayaratna, the then vice president. This move led to great financial savings for the IPM over a long period. The Young Members Forum was introduced by Mr. Jayantha Jayaratna, president in 2002. Mr. Janaka Kumarasinghe, who took over as president in July 2002, introduced the HR Service Providers Exhibition and the Suntel IPM Gold Medal for HR Excellence. He also formed an alliance with NIPM India for an annual exchange program, and the official launching of the nationally lauded IPM Learning Center and Library also took place. In 2003, by providing more recognition, the concept of branding was introduced to IPM with the prestigious logo by Mr. Jayantha Amarasinghe. The subsequent years too brought about significant success for IPM. 2005 saw Mr. Daya Bollegala, President, purchase land adjoining the existing building to commence expansion of the location. Mr. Jayantha Jayaratna introduced the concept of the professional qualification in HRM, the process of which he jointly developed and introduced in 2005 with Mr. Janaka Kumarasinghe. He also introduced the Jayantha Jayaratna Gold Award for the best student of the PQHRM. Mr. Kumarasinghe and Mr. Jayantha Amarasinghe set about branding the PQHRM. A year later, in 2006, the HR Perspectives Journal was introduced by Mr. Krisantha Obesekara. In 2008, the new extended building initiated by the then President, Mr. Lalit Vijayatunga, was opened by Mr. Jeff Armstrong, Director General CIPD UK, while the Members' Lounge was officially declared open by Mr. Krisantha Obesekara on the invitation of Mr. Vijayatunga. This new addition, with all modern facilities, further enhanced the development of IPM. The success story of the institute sped up even further in the following years. In 2009, Mr. Chandra Hevapatri introduced the Great HR Debate in partnership with Mr. Dhammika Fernando, which is a key feature every year at the IPM Annual Conference. In 2012, IPM received ISO certification. Belying its inherent strength, IPM won Gold Award for its annual report and Silver Award at the Brand Excellence in 2013. A definition for HRM by IPM was developed by a team comprising Mr. Samitha Pereira, Professor Ajanta Dharmasiri, and Mr. Janaka Kumarasinghe. In 2014, Mr. Rohitha Amarapala, President IPM, introduced the Great HR Quiz, while in the same year, an MOU was signed between IPM Sri Lanka, NIPM India, and BSHRM Bangladesh to form the South Asian Association of Human Resources. In 2015, IPM successfully introduced the first ever certified HR auditor program in Sri Lanka, while an MOU was signed the next year with Salford University, UK, to conduct BSc and MSc programs. In 2013, Mr. Samitha Pereira, the then president, initiated the process of obtaining, through the Parliament, chartered status. This was meticulously followed up by subsequent councils led by Presidents Mr. Rohitha Amarapala, Professor Ajanta Dharmasiri, and Mr. Dhammika Fernando, who was supported by former Vice President Mr. G. Veeratunga, former CEO Mr. P.G. Tennakon, and Mr. Indika Vijay Srivardhana. Putting the icing on the cake, IPM was awarded chartered status by the government of Sri Lanka in 2018 through an act of parliament.
ශ්‍රී ලංකා සේවා පිරිස් කළමනාකරණ ආයතනය වරලත් සේවා පිරිස් කළමනාකාර ආයතනය ලෙසට නාමකරණය කිරීම මේ පනත තුලින් සිදුවෙන්නේ.
මේ පනත අපි සකස් කළේ මම කම්කරු ඇමතිවරයා වශයෙන් ඒක සකස් කළා. අද ඉන්න අපේ නව කම්කරු ඇමතිතුමා අද මේක ඉදිරිපත් කරලා අද මේ සභාවේ සාකච්ඡාවට ගන්න. ඒක ඉතාමත්ම හොඳ දෙයක්.
ශ්‍රී ලංකා සේවා පිරිස් කළමනාකරණ ආයතනය සංශෝධන පනත් කෙටුම්පත තුන්වැනි වර කියවා සංශෝධන රහිතව සම්මත කරන ලද බව දන්වන කැමැත්තෙමි.
After intense campaigning, CIPM won the bid to host the World HR Congress in Sri Lanka. In 2020, the negotiation team was led by then President Professor Ajanta Dharmasiri and comprised past presidents Mr. Rohitha Amarapala and Mr. Dhammika Fernando. Another latest significant milestone in the same year was the establishment of MAHRP, Maldivian Association of HR Professionals, and introducing it to APFHRM as the newest member of the regional body. Mr. Dhammika Fernando, former president, was instrumental in achieving this feat. In 2020, CIPM launched the Chartered Qualification in HRM with the Syllabus Revision Committee chaired by Mr. Jayanta Amarasinghe. The existing logo after the chartered status was modified to enhance and strengthen the CIPM brand as a key pillar of its identity, which is significant for the long-term success of the institute. CIPM is, without a shadow of doubt, the leading authority on human resources in Sri Lanka, adapting to many changes throughout the years, continuously upholding the highest standards and best practices. CIPM Sri Lanka is a member of the Organization of Professional Associations in Sri Lanka and a member of the Asia-Pacific Federation of Human Resource Management and is affiliated to the World Federation of People Management Associations. CIPM has now expanded to regional offices and study centers with about 1,200 corporate and affiliate members and more than 8,000 students poised and ready to take on the next challenges. CIPM has become that giant tree that is set out to be impacting lives, livelihoods, and the nation at large under successive governing councils and ambitious strategic plans set to take CIPM to greater heights while striving towards continuing this success story in the years to come.